Hello, my name's Madison Griffin, and I will be giving you a brief history of coal and Appalachia in that part of the United States. So I thought I would start out by bringing in this quote from an Atlantic article from 2015. So it says, coal is an inexpensive source of energy, economically speaking, and a costly one in ecological terms. Its carbon emissions are the highest of any energy source. In 2012, coal accounted for 25% of American greenhouse gas emissions and 44% of global carbon emissions. We have already covered the basics of coal and its importance in the Industrial Revolution, so if you need a refresher on that, I definitely recommend what we've learned in the part one of the lesson. But for our purposes here, coal is a relatively cheap fossil fuel. It forms when swampy plant materials and other organic matter are heated and compressed over time. The more pressure and heat that's applied, the higher quality of coal. Lignite is the lowest ranking of coal with the least amount of carbon, and anthracite is the highest ranking of coal that we mine for energy. We already know that coal has been used for a long time in the West. Here's a history for America before the Industrial Revolution. In the 1300s, Native Americans such as the Hopi Indians in the American Southwest would use coal as a source of energy to heat their homes, to cook their food, and to bake the clay they used to make pottery. European explorers also used coal as a resource, but it wasn't commercialized until the 1740s when Virginia opened its first commercial coal mine. Pre-industrial methods for mining coal in America were more the surface or area mining. Since the resource wasn't commercialized and we didn't have the technology or need to delve deeper into coal beds, most people would work only with exposed coal seams. These might have been exposed through erosion, perhaps along a riverbed. When most people think of traditional forms of mining, they are thinking of shaft mining, which lowers workers down one elevator and coal up another, or drift mining, which used horse-pulled carts and then, after World War II, mechanized carts on tracks to move coal outside of a mine. Modern versions of these methods are still used. Surface mining methods started becoming more common after World War II when advances in technology made the process more economical and efficient. Contour mining can be done by hand or by machine. Miners make a ledge at the level of the coal, called a bench, by pushing away the dirt and debris blocking the coal bed. This and the earth above the seam is called overburden. Once the seam narrows, miners can bring in an auger, which drills into thinner coal seams, breaking them up so they can be excavated. Once the contour mining is done, the miners pull the overburden back down over the bench. Mountaintop removal is also a form of surface mining, which removes all of the overburden covering a thick seam coal bed. The debris is pushed into surrounding valleys, which ends up leveling out mountainous areas. So mountaintop removal is highly controversial, as the debris is taken from the top of the coal bed and cannot be used to reclaim the mountain later. It changes the landscape and can drastically affect the surrounding ecosystem and damaging the surrounding waterways as well. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing on the history of coal in the Appalachian region. It's a large area characterized by its rocks and mountain ranges and includes southwest New York, most of Pennsylvania, western Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, all of West Virginia, eastern Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and northern Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. The map on the right also outlines the Appalachian region. A lot of the coal we're mining in the region is bituminous coal, which is marked on the map in gray, but there are also some anthracite mines, mostly along the edge of the Appalachian region, and a lot in Pennsylvania, and this is marked in black. Around 1800, the U.S. produced only 100,000 tons of coal each year. But by the end of the century, the U.S. had become the world's leading coal producer at 243 million tons produced per year. And this is according to the concise Encyclopedia of History of Energy. We have touched on our harnessing of human labor as energy in this class, and coal mining has been no exception. So in the South, before the Civil War, in the antebellum era, slaves were often used as free or leased out labor. Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee continued this free labor system to some extent after the Civil War and through the early 20th century by convict leasing from prisons. So in Central and South Appalachia, migrant blacks, free blacks, were also employed in the mines in the postbellum era. Black lung disease was already a problem during this time, as were explosions and roof falls that killed thousands of workers. The worst mining disaster in American history happened in Appalachia in West Virginia in 1907. The Monongah mine disaster was the name, and it killed 362 miners when 2 mines exploded. In 1910, the U.S. Bureau of Mines was created to basically investigate why mines were exploding, but they had little regulatory power. They were just an information gathering agency until after World War II. Until then, there were little federal health and safety regulations to protect workers. The industry wasn't unionized either. The United Mine Workers of America was not recognized until the Great Depression, when New Deal legislation gave miners the 40-hour work week and made 17 the minimum work age. However, mining accidents and fatalities remained very high until after World War II. In the 1920s, the coal industry in Appalachia was doing well thanks to the boom from World War I. In fact, the majority of coal in production in the U.S. came from the Appalachian region before World War II. It peaked in 1925, when 92% of U.S. coal came from Appalachia, and a full third of this came from the state of Pennsylvania. The 1920s also marked strides in miner unionization, which stabilized worker pay and fought against scrip pay, which was company credit instead of real money for work, which could only be used to buy company goods, and often in towns owned by the companies. But by 1927, the coal industry had already started to depreciate as the industry faced more competition from the growing coal industry in the Midwest and the increasingly cheaper options provided by natural gas, oil, and petroleum, as well as the falling prices of coal on the market before the crash. The coal industry was heavily affected by the Great Depression, and it was only by the implementation of the New Deal and the beginning of World War II that the industry became more stable. So during this time period, and this really affects the area today, so many speculators in the coal industry were from the north, so much the profits from the industry left with the coal, which was used in factories outside the area. Because of this, most of the development of the area focused on transporting coal in and out, and the development in other diverse industries and the area's infrastructure and their educational system remained relatively stagnant, which has led to cycles of widespread poverty, and even when programs were implemented, led to brain drain, in which young, educated people leave the areas they are from because the lack of opportunities in their area. And this cycle continues today. The coal industry was one of the last industries to become mechanized, in part because labor previously had been very cheap. The Great Depression led to more labor-saving and effective technology to be employed. The mechanical coal loading machine, for instance, reduced labor by 30% between 1930 and 1950. This one example is one of many that have led to the coal industry reducing its workforce. Mechanization also led to more surface mining techniques to be used. For example, in contour mining, the introduction of the auger allowed for more coal to be extracted where the traditional picks and shovels couldn't reach them. In some states, contour mining accounted for over half of the mining operations in that state. And by 1958, strip mining, and contour mining is included in that, produced 21.5 tons of coal per miner per day, compared to underground mining practices, which only produced 9 tons of coal per miner per day. Mechanization continued after 1950, and though during this time the U.S. Bureau of Mines did gain regulatory power, and the United Mine Workers of America managed to pass legislation that guaranteed workers better pay, benefits, a pension, and legislation specific to black lung, the coal industry's labor force still continued to shrink, and so did the number of mines in operation. So the increasingly efficient mining techniques did keep production of coal relatively the same, though. While running for election, John F. Kennedy visited Appalachia and saw the extreme poverty of the region firsthand. So while president, he founded the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC, which is still in operation today to study the poverty in the area and provide long-term solutions. In 1964, the new commission released a report that revealed the area's great deficiencies in infrastructure, healthcare, industry, and education. Also, during the 1960s, this is where we first have attempts at mountaintop removal, which is a type of surface area removal in which the overburden, the top over the coal seam, is completely removed to mine the coal from the top down. In 1968, we also had a wake-up call. We had a major mining disaster in Farmington, West Virginia, which killed 78 miners. These had been a lot less likely because of the health and safety regulations, but mining continues even today to still be a very hazardous job for miners. In the 1970s, so women start gaining employment as miners thanks to equal employment opportunities earned in the 60s. However, men still are seen as the typical miner, even today. 1980s, so mountaintop removal starts to become more common because it's the most efficient way to get coal as the cost of labor and technology and the market drives up the price of coal. Between the 1980s and up until 2001, the labor force does continue to decrease while coal production remains relatively stable thanks to the efficiency of the workers. Between 2001 and 2008, during George W. Bush's presidency, there are some relaxations to regulations for mountaintop removal, and there is a boost in mining jobs in Appalachia. During that time, in Kentucky and West Virginia, for example, 1,000 mining jobs per year were opening up. After 2008, up until today, so coal still accounts for over half of our energy for electricity in this nation. Its efficacy as a source of energy decreases, however, because of increasing environmental concerns, which have driven policies in the Obama administration, and also in the increased use of fracking for natural gas, which provides another cheap option for energy. So that'll be where I leave you with coal. So coal as a source of energy has been important in the Industrial Revolution, empowered the Industrial Revolution. But in America, it really did make us a world power by the early 1900s. Without it, we wouldn't really have become that. And the Appalachian region is really to thank for that, as the majority of coal production before World War II did come from that region. And a lot of the work that unions, the strides that they made, happened before that period as well. Today, coal still is a viable source of energy, as it does provide 52% of our energy for electricity. The coming years will really tell us where we are going with coal as environmental regulations continue to tighten on controversial types of mining like mountaintop removal.